In the Aegean, the Bronze Age lasted a little over 2 millennia, from around 3200 to approximately 1000 BC. The civilization that was developed in mainland Greece during that time is called Helladic. It is divided into 3 separate periods: the early Helladic from about 3200 to 2000 BC, the middle Helladic from about 2000 to 1600 BC, and the late Helladic from about 1600 to 1000 BC. The late Helladic period is also known as Mycenaean, from its most important center, Mycenae. The beginning of the Mycenaean civilization is marked by the development of various centers of power and wealth around the end of the 17th century BC. A number of sites are prominent in the Peloponnese, the heart of the Mycenaean civilization, where a small number of individuals of distinguished social standing acquired substantial wealth and power, as is evident from the valuable burial goods in the tombs of its members. The most significant example of this phenomenon is Mycenae. Our knowledge about the beginnings of the Mycenaean civilization comes almost exclusively from cemeteries with impressive tombs containing valuable works of art. As we can see from these works of art, many of which are Minoan imports or influenced by Cretan art, the impact of Crete was catalytic for the formation of the Mycenaean civilization. It has also been suggested that the political and economic change observed on mainland Greece at that time is due to trade that was developed by the Mycenaeans with Europe for the supply of metals such as gold, copper, and tin. During the second phase of the Mycenaean civilization, which covers the 15th century BC, more power centers emerged in addition to Mycenae in Messenia, Laconia, and Attica. After the destruction that hit the great Minoan palace complexes, with the exception of Knossos around the middle of the 15th century BC, the Minoan supremacy in the Aegean passed to the Mycenaeans, who settled at Knossos. Palace complexes similar to the Minoan palaces were established in mainland Greece at the height of the Mycenaean period, that is, the 14th and 13th centuries BC. In the middle of the 13th century BC, the fortification walls of Mycenae and Tiryns were extended and reinforced. At the same time, the Cyclopean walls of the citadels at Athens in Attica and Maidaea in Argolis were built. Like the Minoan palaces, the Mycenaean palaces were the seats of central authority, as there lived the monarch who consolidated and exercised political, military, and religious authority. The economy was led by the palace, the place where products from agriculture, livestock farming, and industry, as well as the raw materials derived from trade, were collected for registration and redistribution. The scripts developed at the time were used to create a complex accounting system for measuring and weighing production, with the help of which produce was distributed. When the Mycenaeans reached Crete shortly after the middle of the 15th century BC, they adapted the older Minoan Linear A script to their own language, which was Greek, and created the Linear B script. the end of the 13th century, the palaces and other important buildings were destroyed by devastating earthquakes and great fires. Their destruction caused the collapse of the palace economy and brought about major social and cultural changes. According to the legend, Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, was the founder of Mycenae. In order to construct the Acropolis fortifications, Perseus used the legendary Cyclops, to whom the walls of Tiryns and Medea are also attributed. Eurystheus, the last representative of the Perseid dynasty, was the king who enforced the famous labors on Heracles. As Eurystheus left no heirs, Atreus, son of Pelops and Hypodamia, was elected king of Mycenae. He was the founder of the legendary dynasty of the Atreids, which became famous through the verses of the tragic poets. Agamemnon, his heir, was chosen to be general of the joint campaign of the Greeks against Troy, as, according to Homer, he was the ruler of a large and rich state, Mycenae, rich in gold. Without doubt, the most imposing achievement of Mycenaean architecture was the fortification system of the citadels. To build the Cyclopean fortifications, enormous roughly dressed blocks were cut from the natural rock and were moved for short distances with the help of levers. When they had to be moved from lower points or lifted higher on the wall, people would build ramps made of earth or wood. The walls were reinforced with impressive towers and bastions that protected the entrances or the more exposed parts of the fortifications. The walls of the Acropolis of Mycenae, which follow the natural line of the hill, were constructed in 3 phases: mid-14th century BC, mid-13th century BC, when the Lion Gate was also constructed, and the end of the 13th century BC. The circumference is 900 meters. They are over 5.5 meters in width, and they are preserved to a height of 8.5 meters in places, while it is estimated that their original height was around 12 meters. The Acropolis main entrance had been designed in such a way as to be impregnable. In front of this entrance, the Lion Gate, the Mycenaeans created a narrow courtyard. This narrow area forced the enemy to approach the gate with a small number of soldiers, while its defenders would strike the attackers from high up on both sides of the fortification. The relieving triangle of the Lion Gate is covered by a slab bearing 2 heraldically placed lions in relief, each with its front paws on a small separate altar. A column supporting the roof of a building rises between the animals. The scene probably symbolizes the royal palace of Mycenae guarded by the two lions. It is considered to be the oldest coat of arms in the Western world and was the symbol of the Mycenaean ruler's authority. The ruler's prominent position is reflected also in the burial rituals and the offerings made to them. It is believed that the placing of burial goods in their tombs was symbolic, as it proclaimed the power of the buried members of a rising aristocracy who had the exclusive use and could take part of their material wealth with them even in death. At Tiryns, the strong walls we see today enclosing the Acropolis belong to the last phase of construction that was completed at the end of the 13th century BC. They too are built of large rough blocks in the Cyclopean system, and they are preserved to a considerable height. Incorporated within their width, which at points reaches 11 meters, are small rectangular rooms, probably storage areas, as well as tunnels in the east and south parts of the fortifications. The information given by the tablets inscribed with the Linear B script and other archaeological data show that the Mycenaean society was a hierarchy with a central authority at the top. The seat of this authority could be no other than the palace itself. The member of the central authority at the highest point in the hierarchy was the person referred to on the tablets as Vanaka. This title is identified with a Homeric annex and indicates the head of state. The Acropolis of Tiryns, the oldest of the Mycenaean fortified citadels and second only to Mycenae, is constructed on a low rocky outcrop. It is just 18 meters high and its total area is about 2 hectares. It is situated approximately 1.5 kilometers from the coastline of the Argive Gulf. During the Mycenaean period, however, the sea was closer to the foot of the Acropolis wall. The fortified area includes a large palace complex which has several building phases from the end of the 15th to the 13th century BC. The Palace of Mycenae was built on various levels at the top of the Acropolis hill. In its final form towards the end of the 13th century BC, It included the north wing with the royal family's quarters, the south wing with the official reception rooms, and the east wing with various ancillary buildings. It was almost twice as large as the other two well-preserved Mycenaean palaces, those of Tiryns and Pylos. The megaron of the Palace of Mycenae consists of a columned porch, a vestibule, and the main room, the Domos. The Domos is a large, imposing, almost square room. In the middle there was a large circular clay hearth with a diameter of 3.5 meters. 4 wooden columns around the fireplace supported the roof, which had an opening to allow the smoke to escape. Past the main part of the palace there is a large square building. It was the palace artist's workshop for processing ivory and making jewelry of gold and semi-precious stones. Next to it is a building with a central court surrounded by columns, and for this reason it has been named the House of Columns. It is possible that the palace storerooms were here. On part of the slope of the lower Acropolis along the fortifications is a series of adjoining buildings. The layout and finds from those buildings show that they were sanctuaries and that this was the cult center of Mycenae. The processional road that led there starts at the palace. The main religious buildings were the temple and the room with the fresco. In the room with the fresco, a large painted composition depicting religious scenes was discovered. Most of the wheel-made clay figures representing divinities and the clay models of snakes that are currently on display in the Museum of Mycenae were found inside the temple. Burial customs during the Mycenaean period are known from the excavations of funerary monuments and cemeteries. Throughout the Mycenaean period, the most common form of burial was inhumation. The practice of cremation was almost unknown and was only gradually adopted towards the end of the period. Offerings were placed in the tombs, the so-called burial goods, kterismata, which ranged from plain to sumptuous depending on the dead person's social standing. Mycenaean tombs were usually family tombs and were in use for long periods. Depending on the dead person's social standing, there were the following types of tombs. The large built shaft graves, the most significant of which were those in the grave circles of Mycenae, and the tholos tombs intended for members of the ruling families. There were also chamber tombs for the urban population. A few meters past the Lion Gate lies the most important burial monument of Greek prehistory. Grave Circle A, with the royal burials, which was excavated by German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in 1876. It consists of a circular area 26 meters in diameter, enclosed by a double row of upright slabs. Grave Circle A contains 6 royal graves with a total of 19 burials and is dated from the 16th to the middle of the 15th century BC. They were initially part of a large cemetery which was split in the 13th century BC when the West Cyclopean Wall was built, incorporating the burials within the Acropolis. Following the burial, the relatives of the deceased held a funerary meal over the grave. Finally, they placed a stone stele on top. Heinrich Schliemann believed that the tombs he brought to light were those of Agamemnon and his entourage. Study of the burial goods, however, has shown that the graves are at least 3 centuries older than the time of Agamemnon. These illustrious dead had been buried in official dress with precious ornaments and weapons. Around them had been placed various valuable vessels, many bronze weapons such as swords, spears, knives and daggers, the latter with fine inlaid decoration of gold and silver, and large bronze vessels as well. Five of the dead wore gold death masks. It has been calculated that these royal dead were buried with gold artifacts weighing 15 kilos in total. Grave Circle B is located to the right of the modern entrance to the archaeological site of Mycenae. It is approximately contemporary with Grave Circle A, which is inside the Acropolis. In Grave Circle B, 25 tombs were found, of which only 14 are royal. The tholos tombs of Mycenae that were constructed during the 15th and 14th centuries BC were large, built subterranean funerary monuments used as family tombs. These royal tombs comprised 3 parts: the dromos, the entrance, and the tholos. The dromos is a long corridor leading to the entrance and from there into the tholos, the burial chamber. The walls of the tholos were always built masonry. The chamber plan was a perfect circle, and its roof was the corbelled tholos. This is why the tombs are called tholos tombs. The tholos was beehive-shaped and corbelled, with circular rows of stones, each of which protrudes a little over the row of stones on which they rest. Thus the tholos' diameter gradually lessens as it rises, ending in a small opening that is closed by a slab. Rectangular pits were usually dug into the tholos floor, and the dead kings were placed inside together with their valuable burial goods. The so-called Tomb of Clytemnestra is chronologically the latest tholos tomb of Mycenae. It was built towards the end of the 14th century BC. The sides of the dromos are covered with dressed blocks of ashlar masonry, that is, in rows of blocks of the same size. The closest tomb to the Acropolis is the so-called Tomb of Eurystheus. It is one of the oldest tholos tombs in Mycenae. It was constructed around 1500 BC, and the top of the tholos has collapsed. Unfortunately, all the tholos tombs in Mycenae were found emptied of their rich contents, which had probably already been removed in antiquity. The most splendid burial monument of the Mycenaean period, the Treasury of Atreus, or Tomb of Agamemnon, is a tholos tomb that was built during the first half of the 14th century BC. The swords and daggers as status objects form part of the wealth that the dead person could own and use exclusively, in death as in life. As weapons, on the other hand, they show that riches and social status depended on the military merits of their owners. Thus they were symbols both of the dead man's military valor and his high social rank. Mycenae may be considered the metropolis of the Mycenaean world. The legendary Acropolis with its cyclopean fortifications, the palace and the other buildings, the 2 royal burial grounds, the 9 monumental tholos tombs, as well as the extensive cemeteries of chamber tombs, bear witness to its grandeur.